Hello and welcome to the Guarda YouTube podcast show, powered by citiesabc.com, businessabc.net, sportsabc.org, and wisdomia.ai. We're excited to continue profiling global leaders, business drivers of the world innovation, and especially bringing to this series stories of entrepreneurs, of makers, the ones that change the world. It's very beautiful and very exciting to speak about things, but the real excitement is in building them, in building projects that can change the world and things that can actually make us better, and especially that can drive better narratives in the days that we are of a lot of innovation, but as well a lot of disruption. In this series that we've been portraying over 300 personalities worldwide, we continue on this journey to find the stories and the personalities that we want to highlight. Today, I'm excited to welcome to our series Stephen Rossi. Stephen Rossi is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Worksport Ltd, a company listed on the Nasdaq Exchange as WKSP. So Stephen founded Worksport in 2011, focusing initially in producing tonneau covers for pickup trucks. Worksport Ltd is a US-based manufacturer developing innovative hybrid and clean energy solutions in light truck, overlanding, and global consumer goods markets. The company announced net sales of about $1+21 million in August 2024. The annual recurring revenue, ARR, rate of $14.56 million, exceeding the 2023 year-end revenue of $1.53 million. Formerly known as Trucksmart Limited, Worksport is a global leader in the production of lightweight tonneau covers and accessories for pickup trucks. Through its wholly owned subsidiary Terravis Energy, Worksport has been working on hybrid energy systems free of any existing grid and 100% carbon neutral. Under his leadership, Worksport has developed partnership with major automotive manufacturers like Hyundai, Ford, General Motors, Toyota, Nissan, Honda, and Stellantis. These collaborations have been integrating Worksport's SOLIS solar covers and core battery systems into electric vehicles. The Worksport has now expanded into the developing of next-generation power solutions through its subsidiary Terravis Energy. Welcome to our series, Stephen. It's an honor to have you here, and I'm particularly excited to talk about your company, about your profile, and actually the fantastic things you achieved, because it's not easy to do what you guys have been doing, and especially in an area that is becoming more and more competitive, and that brings a lot of different velocities of perception, velocities of innovation, and velocities of scalability and business. So Stephen, about yourself, I would like to start, so you have a background in life science in the University of Toronto, and you pursue as well industrial engineering in the University of Buffalo, and your academic background is quite diverse and as well quite rich. So tell us about this multidisciplinary education, how this influenced your innovation, problem solving, and as well a bit of any moments of this education where you decided to be and do what you're doing right now.
My background is on both of my parents' side. We're fraught with PhDs, doctors, those that serve and do research. My uncle, who I look up to, is a research doctor at the University of Toronto. My grandfather was a PhD specifically with chemical engineering. So I was really gearing up to follow in the footsteps of my family with that background. So I was born and raised in Toronto, Ontario. And I graduated high school at a young age, 17, which is becoming common now, but then it was, 18 and 19 were the years of graduation. And here I found myself at the University of Toronto on this track to be a doctor or a paramedic or something in the medical field. And I realized that typically, especially with men, young men, it's very difficult to ask, what is it that you want to do? A lot of people don't figure this out, if at all, until they're, 30s or 40s. Women tend to grow up a little faster at times, so they could figure it out. But I was, here I am, not even able to vote. not able to buy cigarettes or alcohol. Not to say I would, I do, but I've already picked my path for my life. So I'm at the University of Toronto at 18 years old. I graduated as a scholar of high school, and after a few years, I decided to pause my education and take my tuition that I'd saved and worked so hard for in my young years. I got my first job at 13, pushing shopping carts and collecting them. So I took my tuition for my third year and I put it towards starting a business. I'd always loved automotive, but I had this drum beating in my chest that was a seed that was planted, years and years prior, where I loved cars, I loved parts, I loved working with my hands, and that's where the engineering side of me comes from. So I took my tuition and I started a small little business. It was a second floor office in the bad end of town where I started selling spare parts for cars. Fast forward a few years and with tenacity and hard work, I grew that business. And I'd fallen in love with tonneau covers for trucks. I'd fallen in love with America's beloved truck, the Silverado, the F-150. So I had sold my businesses in the early ages, in my early 20s, and I founded Worksport, where Worksport predominantly produces automotive accessories for pickup trucks. I think that it was this cadence of events that had led me to become an inventor, a designer, a business person, and I feel that my choice to learn from the school of hard knocks, from life, was very important. I feel that, in my personal view, people should learn from life first, and then learn from books. Perhaps now that I'm in my late 30s, it's insatiable, my desire for knowledge and reading and academics, history, math. I love it, but I'm glad that I picked the path of learning from life at the early ages. And I've only been an entrepreneur since the age of 18. I've never worked for anyone else. My parents are both teachers, so it's not like I received $1 million from my father to go and build my business, and I've never looked back. So where we are today is where a Worksport is a growing company in New York that manufactures automotive accessories, and we can make our products here in America using American components, raw materials, for the same or better price than they could be made overseas. And I feel that we've used a lot of innovation and ingenuity to be able to outsmart outsourced production.
That's very inspiring, and being always your boss is something I admire, because I only had 2 works in my life as well, so I've been always an entrepreneur. So I want to touch that, because I think like you said, at the moment we are in a very important moment of time when jobs are shifting as they used to be, but you created your own destiny, and like you said, when you were 18. So what made you create this business? And as well, like you said, you start with 14, and you come actually from an academic family. So I'm sure you had a lot of resilience, or at least a lot of other advices. But tell us a bit about that story.
I get the, now fast forwarding, I get the honor and privilege to get to work with my father every day. He works alongside me as a CEO of a subsidiary, which we'll speak about, I'm sure, Terravis Energy. But my parents were both very supportive and saying, go and, chart your own course or forge your own path. I think that what made me make that choice was I remember I was in between classes at the University of Toronto in my first year, and I felt this overwhelming, I can't think of the word. It was fear, because I was seeing herds of bright young minds herding to accounting 101 or, science 101. And I thought, what about those that swing a hammer? What about those that build? What about the bricklayers? And a bricklayer could be one that physically is a mason, or someone that builds foundations of business and forges path and doesn't take no for an answer. So it was started, this drum was beating in my chest in my first year of university, seeing hordes of people that were going to be the next dentists and the next accountants, and not to discredit or discount them, but I wasn't seeing the next generation of those that forged paths that weren't written or weren't on a 4-year planned course, those that charted their own course. I feel that life has a lot to teach you outside of academia, and academia is always there, Dennis. You know that. You could be 100 years old and be studying for a master's or your PhD, and that'll never change. I feel that buying a job through education may be the wrong approach for some, and I had this drive to say, I guess I'll finish my statement in saying, if the ultimate sacrifice is failure, but you still survive. I mean, if my business fails, I don't die, right? I keep going. I'll have very likely a roof over my head and a warm meal. So if that's the worst possible outcome, then there is no bad outcome. So I figured if I had nothing to lose, except and so much to gain, I'll take this risk and I'll resume academia later. And I believe it's worked out because, as you probably found, and people in their 30s and 40s and 50s, your thirst for knowledge increases as you get older. You become more inquisitive. So it was just seeing these droves of the next accountants and the next dentists that made me realize I didn't fit in that box, and I wanted to chart my own path.
So it's about taking ownership of your own destiny and take things forward, which is something that I completely relate with. So your company at 18, and since then, I'm sure you went for a lot of different things. So tell us about that path of creating your company. I'm sure there was a lot of different ups and downs, but a bit of history until you come to create, of course, a Nasdaq public listed company, Worksport.
Sure. Yeah, that's a very colorful story, and I'll tell it as briefly as I can. But at 18, I decided to open an auto parts store in Toronto where I would just simply sell spare parts for cars. I found suppliers, and I could buy parts and sell them to those that needed them, be it mechanic shops or body shops or individuals. That business, the automotive business, specifically spare parts, used parts, is a very tough business. I say that if anyone can survive in this kind of market, in this climate, in spare parts, used parts, very low demographic, people looking for these types of parts are typically on very extreme budgets and some interesting characters. I think that everything else is a breath of fresh air. So in 18, 19, 20, 21, I sold spare parts, and my common, and this gets a little bit on the bad side of the news. My common client was a criminal, Hell's Angels, biker clubs, gangs. These are the types of individuals that generally, at least in our area, in where I was at the time, Toronto, were what dominated the industry. Tow truck drivers were usually members of biker clubs, and I had to learn to be the good person in what could otherwise be a bad crowd. So I learned a lot, and actually through a bad experience, I had started getting into auto recycling. So a quick story is I had an account that I'm 20 years old, and I had an account that owed me, I think, $20,000, and they said, I'm not paying the bill, and we're dangerous people. You don't want to come after us, but we'll give you a tow truck in exchange for the $20,000. That the tow truck wasn't worth $20, but from that tow truck, showing my tenacity, I'd built a very strong second business, which I got into auto recycling. So fast forward in my early, now I'm 24, 25, I had a very big business. I had auto wrecking yards, I had 2 wrecking yards, I had crushers, I had auto parts, I had 50, 60 employees, all from nothing through a lot of challenges. But I had fallen in love with trucks, specifically new trucks, and accessorizing them. And I saw an opportunity where with pickup trucks, like the beloved F-150, that 1 million F-150 sell every year in America, I had seen that the truck was getting better. It wasn't for a farmer or a contractor anymore. It was for the average individual. But the accessories for them were not keeping up. They weren't updating. So I decided to sell everything, take a big plunge, a big risk. I sold all my businesses. I had auto parts stores, I had wrecking yards, all my equipment. I sold everything, and I started Worksport with that money to be able to solve for a problem. And the problem is pickup trucks are becoming mainstream. 20% of every vehicle sold is now a pickup truck, whereas before it was an outside vehicle for a farmer. And that number is growing. It started at it was 18%. Now it's 20. So with Worksport, we're solving for a problem of bringing clever automotive accessories made in America for American trucks. And we haven't looked back.
Well, first of all, congratulations. That is a great story, especially, like you said, colorful. So since then, from 18 to now, how would you say that from taking a company and we push this forward, then that we take it to the next level of taking it a public company and, of course, in Nasdaq, a bit of this history and how you see the company now from that moment in history to build this and to make it what it is right now?
All right. Good question. So Worksport was always faced with a challenge where we had more demand than we had the ability to supply. I mean, when I sold my businesses, I was in my early 20s, 24, 25, so early to mid 20s. And I had sold them for, hundreds of thousands of dollars, which back then I was the billionaire of the neighborhood, right? But I realized that, $500,000 or $1 million just isn't much when you're dealing with starting your own brand. So we were always struggled. I say we, it was me. It's just me mostly alone for a lot of it. I always had troubles buying more inventory to grow sales. So I had gone to a friend of mine and I'd said, hey, I know you're involved. A friend of mine was always involved in financing and investments. So I'd asked him, I said, hey, my business is growing. I want to raise money for it because we have a good problem. We can't keep inventory on the shelves. And I remember him saying, bringing me to an office and sitting me down. And he literally said, yes or no right now. Yes or no right now. Or we take you public or you walk out and you get nothing. And here I am, again, 20, in my mid 20s at the time. And I thought, I have no idea what it's like to be public. But he said, if you go public, we could raise you $1 million. And of course, I'll do anything for my business. So I decided, let's do this. Let's do it. So I took a risk. No large gain could ever be made without a greater risk first being taken, as I always say. I paused my education, took my tuition, started a business. That worked out for me. I sold my businesses and started Worksport. That worked out for me. And then at that point, I thought, I'm going to go public with Worksport to raise money. Why not? Let's take a risk. It was tough, but it worked out. So we went public. Interesting fact, we actually went public in 2014 as if you're familiar, as like a pink sheet company. Like, the movie Wolf of Wall Street, like the pink sheets, and we were a pink sheet company. And it was a disaster. From the moment I had said yes to that friend of mine to go public in 2014, it was a disaster. All the bad actors came out. We didn't raise any money. And here I am now with Worksport and we're public, and I have to figure out how to be a CEO of a public company. Because when people see public companies, they think that stocks just trade. But no, your stock has to be marketed. People have to know about it to trade it. So 90% of issuers or public companies in the market are illiquid. Nobody trades the stocks. The top 10, like Nvidia, Microsoft, Tesla, yeah, sure, those trade, and that's where they could raise money. But as this little tiny company in a very small, otherwise poorly regarded market, I had a new problem to deal with. Not only did I have to figure out how to grow my business, I had to figure out how to grow my stock. And it was at that point that I conceptualized, what does the future of pickup truck look like? And that's where we conceptualized a solar accessory, a solar tonneau cover to charge an electric truck that we know is going to come out. And when we started telling that story and I invented the product and I designed it, it was actually my father's idea. My father said, you should make a solar tonneau cover. And I thought that was brilliant. So we started designing what it would look like, and we got some patents drafted for it. Once we started showing that to the market, this solar tonneau cover, that we're thinking about the future and recharging electric vehicles from the sun, the market really picked up. I'll end my story by saying it was these years of hard work as a small growing business and now a public company, and we have to drag this weight with us. But once we had started telling the market about our future innovation, we thought we could finally raise a little bit of money here, which we had never been able to do before. We were barely keeping our nose above water. We had aspired to raise $1 to $4 million. And on the concept of our solar folding tonneau cover, which we now make here in America, in this very factory I sit from here today, we had raised over $30 million. The market was just massively interested in charging electric vehicles with solar. So we had gone from this little tiny business in this really bad market, the OTC, which the pink sheets, which was poorly regarded at the time. I respect the market, but poorly regarded nonetheless, to raising almost 10 times more than we wanted, $30 million, and being able to really do things much better now with all this capital. And at that time, we decided we're ready to list on Nasdaq, and we did. So that's kind of the story where we went public way too early, which a lot of companies do. And I fought through it. And finally, with figuring things out, we were able to raise way more money than we thought, because we figured out how to excite investors, but also tell a story and grow business concurrently.
Fantastic. So there's a lot of things there where you mentioned, from raising money, from learning, from marketing a company, from as well creating a community of investors and all the different things, and as well creating a new product out of your product and creating an entire new vertical of innovation, which you guys have been doing. So tell us about that, especially how do you see the innovation? Because like you said, you start by the trucks. From the trucks, you create quite a lot of new areas of innovation around energy, around right now electric vehicles, and a lot of different things. So how did it go from this, and as well building the company? We were very young to build, and if people listen to us, and we'll put this during the interview, you put the factory, the photos of a factory and everything is quite impressive, and it's a massive achievement as well. And I'm sure it's a very competitive industry, because the automobile industry right now has been hitting by probably Tesla phenomenon and everything going around that. So a bit of around this part of the innovation and how you take that forward.
Sure. One of the sayings that I live my life by is, from a humble acorn grows the mighty oak. Sometimes you just need an idea and you need to stick with it. A solar charging tonneau cover for a truck is very meaningful, and that's what our claim to fame was. I'm going to explain where it's going, but I'll kind of explain where we came from. Sony's first product, Dennis, was a rice cooker. When you think about Sony, you think entertainment and TVs and electronics and innovation, but they started with a rice cooker. They started with something that they could sell and make money from, and use that money to grow a business. That's the foundation. Like I said, a bricklayer. And I'm no more than a foundation builder. That's all I know how to do. So we had started with tonneau covers, and then our rice cooker. And then we used the success of our tonneau covers, which are now this has been a breakout year in terms of our revenues. And then we used it to invent the next stage. In terms of innovation, one believes that when they buy an electric vehicle, they've done their job for Mother Nature, right? I've done my job. My carbon footprint is mitigated. You may know, and where I sit from here in the United States, in the continental United States, in New York today, the United States has not brought on clean sources of energy, or meaningful clean sources of energy, in a very long time. Nuclear reactors, not very much in terms of wind and solar, although they're making efforts. The majority of the power that's produced here in the United States is natural gas and coal and oil still. From what I know, I might be wrong, but there has not been a lot of new clean energy initiatives. So 20 years ago, you have a pickup truck, and emissions are coming out of the tailpipe of that truck. It's got a carbon footprint. It burns fossil fuels and it turns it into carbon dioxide. When you buy an electric vehicle and you plug it in and it's being charged by a coal plant or a natural gas plant, the question I have for you is, are you merely deferring the emissions from a tailpipe to now the smokestack of a coal plant or a natural gas plant? I don't think we're making the problem better. I think we're just putting it out of sight, therefore out of mind. So electric vehicles, I don't believe, are green unless the sources of energy are green. And I'll tell you what is always green, is solar. So with the SOLIS solar tonneau cover that we produce here in America, they'll provide 30% of the power from up to 30% of the power from the sun that the average American pickup truck driver needs to travel Monday to Friday. The average American drives 30 miles a day. Now, this doesn't include long trips or weekend visits to your in-laws, but Monday to Friday, the average American drives 30 miles or less. Our solar tonneau cover from the sun will charge up to 10 miles, which is 30%. For our solar innovation to disconnect the vehicle from the grid, 30% of the power that it needs is an extremely meaningful impact in carbon footprint emissions, clean energy, and also it allows people to charge vehicles away from the grid. If you're, at a campsite or a job site and there's no chargers, and electric pickup trucks are dominating. There's Rivian, that's large, F-150 Lightning, GMC Sierra EV. Everyone knows the Cybertruck, and there are more coming. Hyundai, through our partnership, they're working on an electric vehicle pickup truck, and every major Ram has the Ram charger coming out very soon. So we've made an accessory that people need. We've assessed, people buy pickup trucks. Pickup trucks are turning electric, and the power to charge those trucks is emitting just as much, if not more, CO2 than the gas engine would have. So our SOLIS solar tonneau cover checks a lot of boxes. And by providing up to 10 miles a day, and the average person drives 30, I think it's very meaningful in terms of its impact. We would for every 100,000 units that we sell, which there's 60 million trucks on the road, for the record, so 100,000 is not a lot. For every 100,000 units that we sell that could recharge electric vehicles or electric trucks, it's like removing 20,000 vehicles worth of emissions, or some statistic that's just awesome.
And that's really, first of all, it's a big number and the big statistics that we have there. So I want to touch more on one of the quotes you have in your website is that the future of off-grid power solutions is rapidly growing renewable energy market projected to exceed 100 billion by 2032, which is more or less in around less than 10 years. So in what you just mentioned, how do you see this, and how do you see Worksport aligning these two different things together?
So clean energy is always important. I think that with natural disasters, Dennis, me being almost in my 40s, and us being at least not in our teenagers anymore, we very likely know what it's like to live, without a phone nearby from growing up, or being able to play outdoors, or not being so connected to the grid. But how fast the civilization goes back 200 years, the minute the power goes out, is remarkable. The minute the power goes out, everything takes a 200. We don't know what to do. We're not connected. We have no more hot water. We can't cook. We can't move. We can't civilization is so dependent on energy, but we're also noticing that natural disasters occur more. So when there's a hurricane or a flood, God forbid these awful things that happen, or a tornado or an earthquake or anything like that, or even just bad windy weather, ice storms that we're seeing in Texas, that, there shouldn't be ice storms, snow in the desert. What's the first thing that happens? Power goes out. The need for clean off-grid energy is huge. And our solar accessories are just the first step towards that. What we're developing now is battery generators for personal care use. So think of a gas generator without gasoline. So once the individual, me or you, start getting solar and battery storage, we now become independent of the grid. Power goes out, we have power. We could plug in anything we need, be it my computer, my laptop, the internet, a stove, a heating element, whatever. So Worksport's working on solar through our solar accessories and broadening that to be for RV, for home, for cabin, for cottage, for job site, for campsite. And we're also working on battery generators that we're going to be launching. You can check them out on our website for personal use, and then integrating those batteries into home grid systems. So what we envision is a future of a home that's powered by solar, charging batteries, and the home is completely off-grid. And it could use the grid for topping up battery systems or for heavy power usage. But the average home could survive with solar panels on the roof and battery systems mounted somewhere within the home. And that's what we're working towards. And what that does is eliminates the connectivity to the grid, eliminates dependence on carbon-emitting energy, like natural gas or coal plants, where the power usually comes from. And it also mitigates the risk of when the power goes out. Power goes out in your house, the power goes out in the grid, your house is still connected because you still have battery storage systems. And that's what we're working towards. We started with tonneau covers to solar tonneau covers, and we're learning about solar and now integrating into homes for batteries. And that's the future of Worksport.
It's great because it integrates the carbon neutral energy solutions altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So on this subject, you created Terravis Energy, a wholly owned subsidiary of Worksport that focuses on developing precisely off-grid carbon neutral energy solutions. So tell us about this subsidiary and as well how, continuing what you just mentioned, how this technology will be increasing, revolutionizing the technology sector and the energy sector together, and how you put all this together.
So we founded Terravis Energy, the company is run by my father, Lorenzo Rossi, who's brilliant in terms of understanding, what the future needs are. And Worksport ends at consumer items. So we end at small solar arrays for trucks or for small applications and battery generator systems for personal carry. So picture you're carrying it from your trunk to the beach, or something for individuals. So Worksport is a consumer brand for consumer products, individual products. Terravis Energy's focus is larger applications like the home or commercial. Terravis Energy has intellectual property around hydrogen, and all these amazing hydrogen energy and fuel cells and all these amazing technologies, but it's specifically focused today on heat pump technology. And if you're familiar with heat pump technology, it's really, really, really interesting. What heat pumps do for the viewers and listeners is they turn cold air from outside into warm air for inside. So if it's cold outside, it'll heat your house, and it uses science to do that. And if it's hot outside, it turns the hot air into cold for inside. So a heat pump uses energy and the differentiation between air and its refrigerant to create heat or cold. The beauty of that is that it doesn't need natural gas, and it's much more efficient and much smaller and more scalable for the average house. The problem is with heat pump technology, the heat pump technology is massive. The heat pump market's massive. It's a $300 billion market globally. The problem with heat pumps is when it gets too cold or too hot outside, heat pumps can't generate the temperatures that you want. So if it becomes in Celsius, if it becomes 50 degrees outside, heat pumps can't make cold air anymore. And if it becomes negative 18 Celsius outside, they can't make hot air for inside. There's a limitation. Heat pumps can only be used in generally minorly variant climates like the United States. As soon as you start getting into Argentina or Alaska or Texas or something like that, where it gets very hot or very cold, heat pumps don't work. So there's a massive opportunity because a lot of the world, like most of South America, deal with a lot of cold, like Chile. People think Chile's a warm climate. Chile's actually a very cold climate in places. So is Argentina. And then there's other areas like most of Europe that are just riddled with extremely hot climates, 50, 52 degrees, 55 degrees Celsius. So there's a lot of homes that need heating and cooling in extreme climates, and people die. What's interesting, we're all worried about global warming, but more people die every year from freezing, from cold. But lesser known fact, but regardless, people are suffering. So Terravis Energy's on the cusp of a breakthrough of developing, and we're about to release this information, more information about this, but we're about to launch an extreme climate heat pump for consumer use, for home use. And the extreme climate heat pumps will produce heat in much colder environments and cool in much warmer environments than any other heat pumps in the market today, addressing a massive need in a $300 billion market globally. So Terravis Energy is focused on clean systems. So again, these heat pumps don't use natural gas to create heat or heating elements. and it addresses a global need. So we're very excited about Terravis Energy. In the future, Terravis Energy will likely become its own separate company as opposed to a subsidiary. Will likely make it its own Nasdaq company. So investors and shareholders can enjoy the benefits of holding shares in both companies.
So in terms of, first of all, congratulations on this variation of building a new itinerary or a new part of the company that became its own business unit. And it's great that you work with your father. That's very special that you put the family from the research and from your work bringing together. So going forward, in terms of one of the biggest success that you've been having is the partnerships with major automobile companies like Hyundai, Ford, and General Motors that have been integrating your solar covers and battery systems. What have been the biggest challenge and the opportunities with these partnerships with the biggest Ford or the biggest car companies in the world?
The biggest problems with car companies is, with exception of companies like BYD or some of the Asian companies from Asia, they move very fast. For example, again, BYD, a very fast moving car maker, innovation and leading edge. The problem with domestic car makers, or at least car makers that sell within North America, is there's so many regulations that they move very slow. When a vehicle is released, the 2025, any make, any model, let's just say 2025 Ford F-150, brand new vehicle, the technology in that vehicle is at least 4 years old because it takes 4 years to bring a vehicle to market. So they have to use technology. They were working on that vehicle in 2021. But they're only able to release it in 2025. The problem with car makers is because they rely on old technology, the market, aftermarket companies like ours and others are moving at innovation speeds far faster than them. So we're working on solar technology and parameters that we'd have to work backwards to integrate with car makers' new models, if that makes sense. Also, car makers are dealing with, so let me, you're like, why is he bringing up BYD? The competition, especially from Asia, like BYD, is moving much faster than domestic car makers. So they're moving the goalposts further and further ahead, and domestic makers are always playing catch up. So they make a lot of changes. Ram, Stellantis, for example, was going to come out with the Ram Rev, which is an electric truck. They decided to stop that development in the middle of it. They launched it at the car show a few years ago in Vegas, and big press push, and then they stopped it. They stopped the development of that vehicle, and they pivoted to a hybrid, a gas engine that charges batteries called the Ram Charger. That's a perfect example. The F-150 Lightning generally hasn't been very successful. In fact, what we understand is companies like Rivian and Ford sell those vehicles at a loss, and they're sitting on the dealership lots. The car makers domestically are not able to keep up with foreign innovation. And the biggest challenges we have with working with OEMs is that they change paths very rapidly because the market's moving very rapidly. So for Worksport, as an aftermarket brand, as a brand that you could buy directly from us, not integrating with the OEMs, you'll buy the latest, the state of the art. You'll buy the state of the art battery system from us and the state of the art solar tonneau cover and state of the art heat pumps. When we want to integrate with an OEM, we almost have to freeze in time. And that becomes very difficult when OEMs are moving directions very quickly. So we've partnered with and worked with almost every major automaker in North America. Hyundai is the one that we've really named. We've developed things for GM. We're developing a cover for Rivian applications, but not in partnership with Rivian, but for Rivian owners. But we're finding that the vehicle technology that they use is a little outdated, and that it's very difficult to keep up with these car makers because they move so quickly, because the market's moving so quickly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an area that is going to be, I think, much growth. And I think more disruption. I think everything happening, especially with automated cars, and now all of these things will be integrated, will bring a lot of new. And I have a couple of questions more on the end about that, but it will bring a lot of disruption, but as well a lot of opportunities, because I think the challenge right now is the legacy system mixed with the innovation that comes from electric cars. And I think you are on the forefront of this, because you are especially touching a lot of innovation, but as well keeping the traditional footprint of these cars, and as well how you integrate as well with houses and different things. And this can bring a lot of innovation for not just the house people, but as well for factories, for a lot of different things that can be focused on. I'm sure that you work on that. So being a listed Nasdaq company, of course, has been affecting your growth and prestige, but as well there's a lot of approach in terms of the way the company has been investing and growing, and as well working with this company on investor relations. So I would like to touch as how you've been managing this relationship, but as well how you touch the growth of the company. And bear in mind that every decision you make, you have to bring it public to investors and different parts. And of course, you are in an area that is massive competitive because everything happening on this, it's changing very often.
Yeah, big topic. Like I said at the beginning of our interview, being a public company means you now have two businesses that need to be marketed. NVIDIA, for example, spends a lot of money marketing its graphic processors, but it also has to market its stock and appeal to stakeholders, stockholders, and investors. What I delineate stockholders from investors. An investor is someone that invests directly with the company in exchange for stock. When that individual sells the stock, he sells it to stockholders, day traders, people that buy stock from the market. And you're dealing with two different types of mentalities. When you go to raise money, these investors are looking to diversify their portfolios, but also mitigate risk. And they want to invest in growth. They want an exciting story. And as you know, some of the biggest scams, for lack of a better word, have been public companies. Lies or misguiding management or failure from management. And in our space, small company space, a lot of companies fail. I think that in 2021, 2022, 2023, the highest level of failures occurred in Nasdaq and public companies because management, a lot of managers know how to build how to be innovators, but they don't know how to build a business, let alone market a stock or keep investors happy. Because of my history where I've been public, I've been a CEO of a public company. Worksport's been public for over 10 years now. I've learned how to build a business, but I've also learned how to build a market and keep Worksport and its shareholders as happy as possible. It's very difficult, especially recently in the past 3 or 4 years. The markets have been very challenged for small issuers. So we've been able to continue to find growth and tell a story of growth. This year has been a breakout year. Last year, believe it or not, we were a tiny little company. We sold $1 million in all of last year. This year, we're selling $1 million a month. Next year, our goal is to sell $1 million a week. That's growth. And when an investor sees tangible hockey stick growth, they know that their investments at least more risk adverse. It's like this company is now, with its rice cooker, as I referenced before with Sony, it's making money. And we're going to use that money to fund innovation as opposed to raising money from investors or diluting our stock. So the question about NASDAQ and the markets they're very difficult. A lot of individuals think that when you go public, it's like the bell rings and money pours in just automatically. That's not the case. As I said, over 90% of public companies, of which there's like 3,000 or 4,000, I think, have no liquidity, no trading. Being public actually causes damage for them. So for us, we're keenly focused on, as a small company, an interesting fact is we have as many shareholders as a big company would. We have like 17,000 shareholders. As a little tiny company, that's very difficult. Most little tiny companies or small companies like us, emerging growth companies, have like 2,000, 3,000 shareholders. We have 17,000. So we've done a great a job of telling our story and spreading our word because our story is one of innovation. We have 200 patents and trademarks globally of automation, of American-made success, but it's also one of growth and stability. And going from $1 million a year to $1 million a month to $1 million a week is a very stable story. And we're going to continue to grow until we start rewarding shareholders with dividends or these types of things.
Well, first of all, congratulations. That's a big growth, to say less. So I think one of the things that it's critical, and this is a sub-question related, is building something, it's a massive task, but then scaling it is another massive task. So like you said, you pass from $1 million per year to $1 million per month. So that scalability, what I would say that you learned during the process of scaling the company and creating these sales, but as well because I think the challenge, and I speak for myself, is when we have a company, and I think for people listening to us, I'm sure is the same problem, is that you have to look at product, innovation, sales, and scalability. And all of these, of course, it's more or less at the same level. It's like you have to put all the balls in the air and keep managing it. I think the challenge right now, especially as we get into a lot of the technology, a lot of AI, a lot of different things, we have more and more distractions. And as well, more and more, I would say, narratives that take us out of focus of everything, because we have everything this every month. Actually, if you look at the news, you get a bit scared. So although we have a lot of great things as well. So how was this trajectory that you said passing right now for that growth, but as well keeping all the innovation that you guys are working, which is quite impressive?
Scaling and growing a business, setting up a factory, producing product. Well, first off, we produce the product here in America because I own a factory in China, and it's been challenging. Doing foreign production is you're dealing with a different type of mentality, a different type of culture, different time zones, and a lot of risk, geopolitical risks, quality risks. And ultimately, one of my sayings, one of my best friends, his father said to me, appeal to the mass, dine in class. Ultimately, Dennis, everything boils down to having some sort of reach that's broad, right? Whether you make a product that ultimately you sell a lot of, or you make a podcast that ultimately is watched by a lot, it has to be a lot. And when you're dealing with a lot of something, you have to scale and learn how to scale, but also be able to maintain quality. And we're also dealing with a demographic. The younger demographic has a much shorter attention span. So scaling with the demographic of consumer or listener or subscriber or anyone that, now takes information 15 seconds at a time, whereas it used to be 60 seconds at a time, is very challenging. So even with me as management, I have a million different bings and bongs and bells and whistles and emails and all these things happening. It's how do I sit and focus? How do I make things simply beautiful, right? So scaling our factory has been very difficult in terms of human resources, like finding people to work here, because where we are in New York, it's a booming area. So we got to bring people in, we got to train them, and don't get me wrong, we're one of the best employers in the region, but human resources has been difficult. Building a product it's so easy to go in your workshop and invent the next, like with the prototype, like the next radio, with bubble gum and tape, and it's like, hey, it works. Well, it's a different story when you make one of them, 10 of them, and then a million of them, right? So to that extent, we've had to make a product that has to be sells and stays sold, gets 5 stars in reviews, and is broadly accepted, and be able to scale it while a balancing act of maintaining profitability, reducing overhead expenditure, all of these things. So how have we been able to do it? One of the things that I say now is the team that I work with are all those that have done. Now, Dennis, you're a serial entrepreneur. You've grown. How many times, and maybe this has happened to you, that you've hired, let's say, a university graduate to be your, director of marketing. They've learned from a book, but they've never done. And you just watch them just drive full speed into a brick wall, right? Because they've never done. What I do is I hire, my management team is comprised only of those that have done. As in, I'm trying to build a shovel, and I hire someone that studied shovels or the professor of shovels. That person's not going to be successful. But if I hire the inventor of the shovel, and I hire him away from the shovel corporation, and he's responsible for $1 billion in shovel sales, in my weird metaphor, that person will always be successful. So the number one key to scaling a business is partnering, either through your staff, your management team, or just partnerships if it's contract manufacturers, with the companies that have done before versus the companies that think they can do or want to do, or those leaders that want to do. again, let's say you're hiring for a leader in marketing. You have to find, and you're selling a certain product, find a director of marketing that has done that before versus someone that's studied to do it. So scaling is all about having a team that's been there before. You need someone to teach you how to do things as opposed to teach them how to do things. So that's been the number one part, and that's how we've been successful.
I completely subscribe. It's not an easy task. There's going to be probably more complex because we are having fragmentation of conventional knowledge and education, and as well, like you said, the practicalities of building a business and keep it growing. So I know that I'm passing the time, so I want to be respectful. So a couple more questions just to wrap up. So the global supply chain has faced significant disruption in the recent years. Especially in your industry, there's a lot of different things. As a company, as you are a Canadian based in the US, how you see this disruption of the supply chain, and as well how you see both what you are doing in terms of the products you're building with the tonneau covers and the clean energy products, and as well going forward how you scale this part of this supply chain and to scale your business and be prepared for potential disruptions.
Supply chain is difficult. So I'll start by another kind of metaphor, that I people call them Steve-isms around here. I'm full of them. Is that there's three different types of business domestically. So let's just say you live in a certain part of the world and I live in a certain part of the world. There's no better or worse. We're all humans. We're all family. We're all connected. But the domestic economy is critical, right? If UK does well, then Spain will do well. And if Spain does well, so does, generally high tide sail all ships. So I think that if you're selling a product in a domestic economy, the manufacturing of that product should support that local economy. So there's three different types of businesses. I think bronze, silver, gold. Gold is us, or companies like us. We use domestic material. So our metal, our plastic, our paints, the raw materials are domestic. And then they're manufactured, the aluminum is mined from the ground and turned into sheets, and the sheets we buy. So it's American, fully American made. That makes an American product that's sold to an American customer that at the end of its life is recycled by an American recycling yard. And it's a circular economy, and it supports at all facets of the supply chain domestic. The supporting of the domestic economy is important, but also it mitigates a lot of supply chain risks. Now, some companies or industries can't, there's certain specialized materials like semiconductors or certain special components that have to come from a certain area, or special materials and metals. But as much as possible, supporting domestic economy concurrently is good for the economy, but concurrently mitigates supply chain risks, geopolitical risks. So when we raised all of that money, we were importing from China. As I said, I own a factory in central China. But I thought with the money that we've raised, I could do it here. I could make a product here in America for the same price or less than I could make it in China for. We've been able to do that. So we could outsmart the thought process of make it cheaper in China or make it cheaper in India. You can make product domestically. You just have to design it to be manufacturable, to hit the price targets you have. Supply chain risks. So we also make power electronics, and supply chain risks on the semiconductor side is wildly volatile. There was a semiconductor that we were buying from Russia that was banned because it was being used in some sort of war, some sort of, I don't know what, but so you use like a certain semiconductor that's meant to turn on a circuit board, and it becomes banned because it's being used, it's been sanctioned against because it's being used for, I don't know, some sort of a bad thing. I'm not sure. What I'm getting at is it's extremely volatile. Mitigating and dealing with those risks is virtually impossible on highly specialized items like certain materials, raw goods, or semiconductors, or motors and specialized products. So we just try to make products that are using generally available products, and we generally purchase the products as close to our factory as possible, and that tends to be the best solution. For example, I'll end by saying we used to order aluminum extrusions from Turkey. And when we had a problem, you have to call or email or Zoom or fly to Turkey. Now we buy aluminum extrusions from Michigan and we're in New York. We have a problem. It's a 50-minute flight and we're at that person's door and we're solving problems. So domesticating your supply chain where possible, or designing product to be able to source materials domestically, is the best way. My anecdote about that semiconductor from Russia, for example, is design a product that doesn't use that semiconductor. Diversify your bill of materials so that you can get everything as close to home as possible.
Yeah, this is one of the approaches that always works and keeps it safe. So last two questions, and I want to focus. The first one is still related to what we're talking, but I'm particularly interested in the last one that I have. But let's on the growth. So you are expanding both the sales, the innovation, and the different products, and as well you have a lot of priorities both as a public company, but as well in terms of product development and market reach. So how you see it right now, your expansion and your growth in the next, let's say, 1 and 5 years?
So in the next 1 year, our first target is cash flow positive, to become a profitable business, a business that starts to put money back into investors' pockets, which is the gold medal. Like that's really the number one thing. Remember, we only started selling this year. Last year was a trial year, $1 million a year, again, $1 million a month. And now we're really going to plan on, next year we plan on growing so that we're cash flow positive. While continuing to think on a quarterly basis strategically about the innovations we're going to launch later. We plan on integrating our technology into other markets. So how do we take solar panels from a truck and then put them in a home? Or how do we take batteries that you carry in your trunk and put them in a cabin or RV or airplane or a boat? And we're thinking about medical, we're thinking about military, we're thinking about governmental, we're thinking about bigger pictures. But so we're continuing to fuel innovation, but we're working on becoming cash flow positive so that we could use the cash we make to fuel the innovation as opposed to need investment, which we no longer need. We're basically there. So in the very short future, fuel innovation, but become cash flow positive. 5-year target is meaningful strategic mergers and acquisitions. How can we add through vertical integration, or perhaps even lateral integration, which means like related businesses, not in the supply chain, but maybe on the cell chain? How can we integrate through acquisitions to grow into upper middle market and beyond, while finding strategies to benefit all businesses? So vertical integration through M&A is always beneficial because maybe it helps us on the logistics side or on the supply chain side, we don't know, or the sell side. So the goal for, again, year 1 is cash flow positive and use that cash to really fuel innovation towards integration, getting our technology to integrate into other, not maybe broadening beyond automotive. And then a 5-year plan is mergers and acquisitions of related businesses to grow into a 9 and 10-figure entity, so that we become a real force to be reckoned with.
Excellent. So my last one, and it's a big one, so we'll take your time on this. So you're touching probably the more sensitive parts. So you're touching one end, automobile industry, energy, carbon footprint, electric vehicles. All of this is going through a massive amount of disruption, especially, and of course, there's a lot of opportunities for a business like yours because you are already solving solutions in multiple verticals. But my question here is looking, and here probably is a question not just to you as a CEO, but as you as a citizen. How do you see the innovation coming from your company and solving a lot of the real problems we have? Because in the one end, we have the real problems of climate change, although there's a lot of variations of how you look at it. There's as well the sustainability of bringing this to your house, to your own products. And then, of course, with artificial intelligence in particular becoming mainstream, how you activate the automation and the robotics component, which I'm sure you're already tackling with part of your solutions. But I want to see, it's a big question, but I want to touch this probably in the relationship to your innovation and the segments of your business.
There's 2 thoughts that I have. The first one relates to a story. So when we had our ribbon cutting ceremony here, we had in New York, we had senators and various members of the government, from local to federal, here, to celebrate and ask us questions and shake hands. And I keenly remember that one of them, had come and he shook my hand and he was congratulating us. And he had asked, he goes, how many factory workers are you going to have working here? And I stopped and I paused and I thought about it. And my answer was, if I could have 0, I think that I will have 1. And let me explain why. And he wasn't happy about that answer. And I said, let me explain. I think that if my father was a shoemaker, the idea that I should become a shoemaker as well defeats the purpose of generational growth, right? My father was a shoemaker so that I could become a doctor. And then my kids could become an astrophysicist or an astronaut or something amazing. I think that if we if we could perpetuate is the word I'm looking for, a manufacturing economy, then I think that we stagnate, right? China's faced a lot of those issues and they've dealt with them, where now, even in China, for example, they're having a hard time getting the younger crowd, the younger generation to want to make products. Most of the factory workers are retirement age or beyond. When I go there, literally most of the factories filled with seniors. The young crowd is focused on evolving. Domestically here, we want to keep jobs, right? But I think that if you automate through artificial intelligence, which our factory is one of the most state-of-the-art automated factories in its space in automotive production. We have really cool equipment from Europe and other places of the world. But if we could scale this factory using robotics and artificial intelligence, we will still have 100 or 200 staff here. But what we would do is we would develop the local workforce from being those that swing hammers to those that code or program or engineer. We would develop the workforce because we don't need them to be manual labor assemblers anymore. We need you to automate this machine in this next process cycle, or figure out how we can expand this machine or robotics equipment and to do this next task or next product line. So once I was able to explain what my intentions are, I think that it's one of growing and continuing to nurture a workforce, but upskilling the workforce from being generational. My son was a worker, my father was a worker, and I'm a worker, to my father was a worker and I'm an engineer. Because this company, I started as a worker, but this company trained me how to be a robotics operator or an engineer. And New York specifically has a lot of great programs to help develop all that kind of stuff, to develop individuals. So we want to have hundreds of people working here, thousands of people working here, but we don't want them to swing hammers. We want them to program. We want them to automate and use brains as opposed to brawn. In terms of dealing with individuals, you're right. A lot of what we see is confusing. Is climate change because we're coming out of an ice age, or is it because methane gas from cows? We don't know, right? But what I do know is the individual needs to be served. I do know that the individual wants to do good. The individual wants to be disconnected. And the individual wants solutions that serve their life. And again, appealing to the mass, you diamond class. So by Worksport innovating individual innovations for you and I, as opposed to the masses, like a product for a building, as opposed to a product for individuals within the building. So what I'm saying is we're focused on touching individuals, providing battery and solar and clean energies for the individual, as opposed to a stadium or a building complex. So as long as we continue to serve, and individually, you, I, and anyone listening probably would love the idea of clean energy off-grid. Like, hey, I have a house, I'd put some solar panels on the roof and some batteries to be off-grid. And I think that through an individual approach and appealing to the masses, I think that that's when you make real change. Because if we could already disconnect an F-150, the most carbon-producing type of truck out there, disconnect it from the grid 30% of the power it needs with our solar innovation, imagine what we can do with homes using our heat pump technology or our battery storage technology. So I think that instead of going from the top down, i.e. the big projects, I think that we're going to try to reach consumers directly and make change through helping consumers be able to get off-grid, whether it's the job site or the campsite, or a natural disaster or first responder. We want to serve the individual. And I think through the many, we'll slowly change to be able to disconnect the person and allow their quality of life to increase, whether it's through an emergency or, a beach party that they want to power using solar.
I completely subscribe. And it's a very good way you put it, because it's the challenge right now is how we put all of this working together without losing our humanity and our different parts. It has been an honor to have you here on the podcast and show. First of all, congratulations on all the efforts of building something, like you said, from almost childhood to a very big global company, and as well integrating a lot of innovation and a lot of different things. And I hope for people listening to us, they can understand more about the company. We'll put all the information about this. And I just want to thank you for being here. I don't know if there's any last things you want to just share with our audience, but it's been, for myself, thank you so much.
No, I have nothing much to share other than it's the honor and the privilege is all mine. You put a lot of work and a lot of great brain power into the podcast that you do, the questions you ask me, and those that you've interviewed. So I'm a fan. I'm a watcher. I'm a listener. It's people like you and programs like this that really help share stories that are really driving innovation on a small scale, as opposed to what we see on the news or the bigger picture.
No, and I think from the small, you're making a big scale. I think it's very impressive. So I learned as well a lot about, especially on the details and how you take things sometimes in one direction into another. Thank you so much, Steven. It's an honor, and all the success for your company and for your endeavors.